Hello, Berry Aftercare friends. Here we are with tonight's episode. I always say tonight because I'm usually recording at night, but if it's morning where you're at, well, this morning's episode. Wherever you're at, I'm grateful you're joining me. Whatever time of day it is, we're talking about a really hot topic, one that I'm sure almost everyone listening to this episode can relate to, and that is self-sabotage. Last episode, we talked about what do we do when other people are attempting to sabotage us. And we had someone ask, can you talk about self-sabotage? So that's where we're going tonight. So hold on. It's going to get real. And as always, I'm going to come at you with a fair and firm approach, meaning there'll be lots of compassion and a little butt kicking tonight. All right, let's talk about what is self-sabotage, some examples of self-sabotage specifically, of course, because this is a bariatric podcast in relation to weight loss and weight management. And then we're going to talk about what are the reasons that people engage in self-sabotaging behavior and what do you do to stop this? How do you stop engaging in this self-sabotaging behavior that takes you farther away from your goals? So that's kind of the definition right there of what self-sabotage is. It's any behavior that you do on purpose that undermines your progress toward reaching the goal. Self-sabotage can actually take the form of not doing something that will lead to the goal. Basically, you can define self-sabotage as when we get in our own way of succeeding or following through with something that we're saying that we want to do. So let's talk about the difference of doing something on purpose that gets in the way of your goal. An example of that most people have done is go to the grocery store and purchase things on impulse that are not in line with their goals for weight loss or maintaining their weight and living that healthy lifestyle that they're looking for. So that would be an example of doing something. An example of inaction that's self-sabotaging would be having a plan to ride your bike this day or that day and not following through with it. So that would be inaction. That's also an example of self-sabotaging because it gets in the way. It derails you from going in the direction you say you want to go. Now, last week we talked about how people can sabotage you in either conscious or subconscious ways. And the same can be said for self-sabotage. Sometimes people are very aware that they're going in and they're going in hard for the self-sabotage. It might come across like, well, screw it. I already ruined it today. Might as well blow it for the rest of the day. That would be an example of conscious self-sabotage. Or you might subconsciously or unconsciously set yourself up for sabotage. So maybe you have a busy day ahead of you and you know you're going to be in the car a lot or not be home for a long time, but you quote, air quote, forget to pack your healthy snacks. So on the surface, it may seem like a simple, oh gosh, I just didn't remember, or I didn't have time. I meant to, but I didn't have the time. But the truth is, you want to stop for fast food or eat the junk food at the game or the concert or wherever you're headed. Or maybe it even goes a little bit deeper than that and is more subconscious. Maybe you forgot to pack the snacks because you're really afraid somewhere deep down inside of you, you're afraid to succeed. And so you subconsciously set yourself up for failure. Hence, the goal of keeping that weight off or losing that goal, living the healthy lifestyle that you want or that you say you want is thwarted, interrupted. This is going to derail you a little bit. Something that's important for you to remember as we talk about this self sabotage, and this is important so that you can be compassionate with yourself or toward others. Sometimes we tend to judge others who are on a different journey. They have goals and they seem to be sabotaging themselves. And we're like, gosh, can't they see what they're doing? The same is sometimes true for us in our journeys, but because it's us, we got big old blinders on and it's harder for us. But this is a way to have compassion for others who you can clearly see sabotaging themselves and to have compassion for yourself. A lot of times, self sabotage comes from a need to protect yourself, or it can be thought of a form of self preservation. That doesn't mean it's healthy. That doesn't mean it can be used as an excuse. But sometimes what we're protecting ourselves from can give us insight into what we need to address in order to actually change that behavior. This sounds complicated. It is a little bit complicated. And this is not likely something you're going to figure out on your own. But let's say that if you've struggled with anxiety or stress as a child and it was, you had nowhere to go with it and you had nobody to turn to and you didn't understand it yourself, but food was something that gave you a little bit of a reprieve from that stress or from that anxiety. Chances are that's an automatic behavior for you now. And when you're an adult, if you haven't somewhere along the line learned the skills for dealing with stress without turning to food or some other substance or behavior that's harmful for you, it may be your go to. It may be all you know, it's all you can think of in the moment. So if you've not been taught the skills for working through stress, or you've not been taught the skills for taking healthy steps to deal with being overwhelmed, or if you haven't learned some breathing skills or some other tools for working toward quieting that anxiety, it may be that you turn to what you've always known and what's always worked, which may be food or another substance, to find relief. And yet that relief is only temporary, but you're doing it to take care of yourself in lieu of having healthier skills to help you get to the same goal. So, again, not an excuse because now you're an adult and you can take steps to learn the skills that you need to learn in order to be healthier on your journey and learn to deal with stress and anxiety and life in healthier ways. So, a lot of us may have learned other unhealthy behaviors to help us survive when we were kids. Maybe you had parents that were arguing a lot and you found some comfort by finding a bag of chips and finding something to watch on TV. Good distraction helped soothe you. So, if you haven't, again, learned the healthier skills as an adult, to know how to deal with that kind of anxiety or stress, you go to what you know. So it's really common, especially for the things that maybe we did as kids to survive in whatever difficult situation you may have been thrown into. And if we don't take the time to learn the skills. It's what I say all the time about the importance of bariatric care. It's kind of like the emotional gotta do's. Weight loss surgery will help you lose weight. And if you do the behavioral gotta do's, the drinking the water, eating the protein first, eating at appointed times, exercising, all of those things, then chances are good you will keep the weight off. But so many of us have things that are deeper and more layered that interfere with our ability or willingness to follow through with the behaviors. And those things are the emotional gotta do's, the ability to handle stress, the ability to do things on our own if nobody's going to do it for us, the ability to maintain the uh, consistency when the going gets tough. So we have to learn those skills. And These are the same behaviors that sabotage us. If we're not following through with the behavioral gotta do ons, all the research that says this is how you maintain weight loss, it's likely there's an emotional thing that's interfering and you're not aware of what it is. But if you take the steps, here's the butt kicking. If you take the steps, if you say, this has got to change. I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Or maybe you do know why you're doing what you're doing, but you don't stop it anyway. Nothing's going to change, friends. You've got to learn something new because what you're doing isn't working for you. And it won't work for you until you probably get some intervention, a therapist or a coach to help you be more accountable, or you dig into the bariatric care group and use it fully. There are so many great skills and tools on there. How many of those are you utilizing? This, my friends, falls onto you. So if it's going to happen, it's going to be you that makes it happen. All right, so that's what self-sabotage is. What are some examples? Well, I posted online and asked people for some examples of what are some things you do that are self-sabotaging in nature. Ooh, I got some good responses, and I'm not going to call anybody out because all of these are things that I hear almost every day in my work with patients. How about you don't eat on your schedule? You skip meals, and then when you finally get to eating, you're ravenous. Well, this is a behavior that a lot of people do before they have surgery. And if you're continuing this after you have surgery, then that responsibility falls squarely on you. You need to get help so that you are more accountable for eating on your schedule. So I think this is a pretty common self-sabotaging behavior. Here's a good one. And again, I've heard this many times. It literally makes me sick to eat sugar and a lot of processed carbs, but I do it anyway. Okay, there's no other word for that than self-sabotage. Here are a couple emotional ones. Believing you don't deserve happiness. So when happy moments happen, the self-sabotaging behavior comes in. I have seen this. I have engaged in this. Not just in earlier in my recovery, but there are times today when I still do this. And I have to work consistently with the self-talk, with the taking a moment to breathe. I have to utilize all the skills myself that I teach other people because there are times when these old thoughts come back into your mind and I have to work hard to put them to rest. Not feeling worthy of love. And so when people show you love and get close, then you sabotage yourself with the unhealthy behaviors. That's another one example that somebody gave. So a lot of this is not feeling worthy. And we'll talk about where that can come from. I've talked about it in many, many podcast episodes over, the last couple of years. But this is a big thing for people, not believing in yourself. And this makes a lot of sense when you think about not only how you may have been treated as a child, but how you've treated yourself as an adult in relation to your weight. You've said terrible things to yourselves. You've given up on yourself. You've abandoned yourself. And so, again, you're going to continue to do this until you get some help. And that's only going to happen if you seek it out. Here's an example. Buying more crap for the rest of my house. Who hasn't done this? Well, my kids need the treats. Or why should my husband have to suffer or my partner? Because I chose to do this. Well, they don't have to suffer, but you don't have to be the one using them as an excuse for your behavior. They're grown. If they want to go out and get themselves some things that you choose not to put into your body, that's up to you. But so many people buy the crap knowing they're going to engage in it. They're going to eat it themselves. And your kids also can be taught that this isn't a good thing for me to have in the house. I'm not saying you can't have it, but we'll stop at the convenience store and you can buy a single serving and eat it before we get home or whatever it happens to be. But they're not going to be deprived. You don't have to use your kids as an excuse to bring crap into the house. Telling myself when I'm upset that it's just one cookie and then going for broke and I eat all of them so they won't be here to tempt me. That's the rationalization and excuse in my head. That's another thing somebody said. Well, if I eat them all, they'll be gone and then they won't be here to tempt me until the next time I bring them into the house. Somebody said, I start to do really well and then I mess myself up. Self-sabotage at its finest. Absolutely. So, what we're going to have to do, and we'll get to this when we get to the part on how do we stop this behavior, you're going to have to do some digging. What's going on that I would engage in this behavior when I know it's taking me further from where I say I want to be? Another person said, saying one won't hurt. And it does. Often it hurts. Grazing. I buy the groceries that should never have been bought. Same thing. So we've got to take more responsibility. People are acknowledging what they do. But if you really want to stop this, and I'm going to tell you, I was reading this book. I'm reading this book, and it's not a therapy book. It's not a self-help book. It is a nonsensical, just easy reading, easy listening book. And I listening to it when I walk. And there's a situation and there's a grandpa in the book and he teaches his kids and his grandkids, hard things are hard. Hard things are hard. And honestly, I've been using that myself the last couple of days because I'm struggling with an old, very deeply ingrained anxiety that has been triggered lately. And it's just kind of taunting me and haunting me. And so, in response to dealing with this anxiety and just wanting it to go away and hoping it will magically disappear, I remind myself hard things are hard. And so, I've got to put the effort and use the same skills I encourage everybody else to use in attempting to, minimize this anxiety. So, hard things are hard. If you really want to change these self sabotaging behaviors, you've got to be willing to do some hard work. So, in my research and preparing for this episode, I found some of the more common patterns of self defeating behavior. And these don't have to do specifically with the examples people shared with me. But many of the examples, when I say we got to dig deeper, what's going on with you? Especially one that's like, I do really well and things are going well and I mess it up. Well, perfectionism. Perfectionism is one of the biggest triggers for self-defeating behavior. Some people think of perfectionism as a good thing. And my grandson, the oldest child, the oldest grandchild, is really hard on himself in this regard. And so I said to him the other day, I said, it's not important for you to try to be perfect at all of these things. I see you get really upset with yourself in an attempt to do so many things perfectly. I said, perfection is not a goal. Perfection is not something to strive for. Why not? He asked. I said, because A, it's not possible. No person can be perfect or do perfectly at all things. So you're just setting yourself up to be angry and upset with yourself. So perfection isn't a good thing to ascribe to. Expect goodness from yourself or excellence from yourself, but not perfection. So if you think, if you've described yourself as a perfectionist, that may be something you need to look into. Where did this come from? What's keeping me engaged in this line of thought and this strain of behavior? Because it always leads to sabotage because you can't be perfect. And another trait of perfectionism that has to do with self sabotage is procrastination. So if you expect yourself to be perfect, chances are good you're going to put off starting because the expectations are so great. You put off your responsibility in doing things and then you get behind and you prevent yourself from having the time. So it's such a setup. Procrastination is a setup for self sabotage. Perfectionism is a setup for self-sabotage. If that's something that you need to do or that you do, then maybe you need to get some therapy or some coaching to look at what keeps me involved in this? What purpose does it serve? Because that kind of behavior is inevitably going to lead you away from where you want to go. Perfectionists also tend to engage in that all or nothing thinking. I'm going to do it perfectly or I'm not going to do it at all. I'm going to eat no carbs or I'm going to eat all the carbs. I'm going to do exercise every single day, twice a day, or I'm not doing it at all. Again, set up for failure because you're expecting perfection. So the first time you slip, you say, screw it. And then we've got that intentional self sabotage. So we want to stay away from that, not be so harsh on ourselves, not talk to ourselves in a way that's going to interfere with our potential. Mm-mm. All right. And all of these things are so interconnected. If you struggle with the all or nothing thing, you're also going to have trouble with boundaries. And boundaries can be I'm doing all or I'm doing nothing. That can be a type of boundary, which is going to set you up for failure. But if you don't know how to set boundaries, like I'm going to exercise 3 days this week, and that's all I'm going to allow myself to prevent myself from falling into perfection. Or I'm going to set boundaries with myself when it comes to this food and that food and that food because they trigger me. So I'm going to say no to myself. Hard things are hard. What do you want more? You got to ask yourself those tough questions. All right. Also, people pleasing. People pleasing needs boundary setting. So if you're saying yes to everything, then you need to learn to set boundaries because you're going to say yes to yourself to the point where you're going to be exhausted mentally and physically. And that's a setup to get like, I don't have time to fix something good. I'm just going to go through the drive through. You make excuses and there comes the rationalization. All of these things that can often lead to exhaustion. All right. Lack of self care is another great setup for self-sabotage because if you don't take care of yourself, and you've heard this 1,000 times, 1,000 ways, put on the oxygen mask yourself before you try to attempt to help somebody else. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to help anybody else. If you don't do what you're supposed to be able to do, you're going to feel bad about yourself. You're going to fall into that negative spiral. You're going to be calling yourself names. You're going to get depressed, and then you're no good to anybody. And when you do try to help them, you're going to be crabby and negative, and you're going to lash out at other people. And that's interfering in healthy relationships. So there you go. Do you lack self care? That's a setup. That's self-sabotaging behavior. How are your communication skills? Not too long ago, I did a whole podcast series on communication. Lack of communication is shown to be one of the greatest indicators and setups for self-sabotage. One example is you don't tell people what you need or what you want. I would really appreciate if you would keep this food out of the house. Well, if you don't tell them that, and then they bring it in and you get all ticked off or you eat it, you've sabotaged yourself because you haven't made your goals, your expectations, your desires made clear. Now, that doesn't mean you have the right to control other people and if they follow through or not, but you do need to set up your specific expectations with other people. Please keep XYZ food out of the house because it's a big trigger for me. If they bring it in, then you're going to have discussions about boundaries and where to keep it, where not to keep it, those kinds of things. Or you're going to have to get some outside support to help you avoid it when you're in that location. But the communication piece is it's your responsibility to let them know what you want, so that you can't say they brought it in the house, that they brought it to my desk at work. So here's another example. If we don't ask for help knowing that we need it, then that's a communication problem and that falls back on you as well. I need more help from the dietitian, but I'm afraid to ask, or I've regained and I'm afraid to look stupid. Well, your communication is your responsibility. Your need to ask other people can only come from you. And if your pride is in the way, that's a problem. And if your pride is in the way and you refuse to ask for help because you'll look like you need help, maybe you need help to sort that out because that isn't going to get you anywhere. We need to understand that it's okay to ask for help. You don't need to be a control freak. You don't need to control other people. You need to ask for help in the areas that you need help. So, if controlling is a thing, if not asking for help is a problem, if communication is an issue and not asking for what you need or what you want or making it clear this would be difficult, then that's on you. All right. Now, self communication. This is a huge problem for so many of us, and we have to work super hard. Hard things are hard. Then we have to work hard to take care of them. Stinking thinking, listening to that inner critic, saying to yourself, maybe you heard these things in your past, but do you say them to yourself? I'm just not good enough. You know what? Everybody thinks I'm an idiot. I think I'm an idiot. Nothing's ever going to work out. I'm going to mess this up. We've all got this inner critic, but we have a choice as to whether or not we silence it. We have a choice as to whether we say, I'm going to continue to engage in this because it gives me an excuse to eat unhealthy things. Or we have the choice to say, this isn't helping me. I'm going to put an end to this by being aware of when I'm doing it, telling myself to knock it off, and doing that over and over and over until I finally engage in healthier self talk. Hard things are hard, they take a lot of work. Rationalizing. I like to help other people. And you probably do. Maybe you are just a natural caretaker or a natural fixer. But if this gets in the way of you having an excuse to, well, I was taking care of everybody and I just didn't have time to take care of myself. It's a caretaking thing again. Or I just didn't think to pack snacks for myself. It's an excuse and it's a setup for your own failure. I've talked about the issue with low self-esteem affecting so many people and their follow through. Bottom line, my friends, if you suffer from low self-esteem, and it's hard not to, if you've been criticized your whole life, if you've been made fun of about your weight, if you've been left out of social groups because of your weight, if your family or friends, teased you, but it was hurtful, then it's hard not to have low self-esteem. And then we exacerbate or make it worse by engaging in negative self-talk ourselves. So you've got to find a way to improve this self-esteem. And again, I've said this in so many episodes that if we have self-esteem, behavior towards self is going to reflect that. The self-talk will reflect the low self-esteem. The unhealthy behaviors, whether it's in regard to relationships or communication or movement or eating well or going to the doctor and taking good care of ourselves, people who don't feel good about themselves don't treat themselves well. End of story. So if you're not treating yourself well, maybe as you do a deeper dive, if you're willing to do that hard work, you might realize that low self-esteem may be playing a part in that. So I'm going to just review some symptoms of self-sabotage if you haven't already caught on to this. But sometimes the things are really subtle. And we self sabotage at home, at work, in our relationships, in our personal goals. We do it in so many arenas. I've already mentioned this, but refusing to ask for help. trying to control other people. Don't you dare bring this into the house, or, you're going to do this or you're going to do that. Controlling is about a lack of self-control. It's about, I want to control other people because maybe I don't feel like I have much control, or maybe I don't feel very, maybe you had a ton of chaos in your life as a child. And so, now you want to micromanage everything. So whether, again, it's in a relationship with your coworkers, it's not going to get you where you want. And it's very, very self-defeating. And it is a form of self-sabotage. Do you start conflict? Do you pick fights? Whether, again, it's at work or with the people that you love. Maybe setting goals that are too high. Going to exercise every day. That's too high of a goal. Or I'm going to eat no processed food. Too high of a goal, not sustainable. Maybe you set goals that are too low. It could happen. And that is also self-sabotaging. Isolation. We need other people. We need other people for accountability. We need other people for self-growth. We need other people for affirmation, for purpose. And so isolating ourselves can be a setup for self-sabotage. Blaming, making excuses. Well, it's your fault if you hadn't brought it into the house, or, my kids needed it, so I brought it into the house. So you're making excuses. Anytime, this is just another definition of self-sabotage, undermining your goals or undermining your values. Any kind of substance abuse, overspending, or overdoing it in any way is a way of sabotaging yourself. Or constantly seeking approval, just being so depleted on the inside is a good sign of low self-esteem, which is going to set you up for self-sabotage. Not being willing to stand up for yourself. Back to that communication. Can you stand up for yourself? Can you say what you need? Can you say what you want? Can you ask for help? Can you set boundaries? Communication. All right, so those are examples of self-sabotage. Why do we do this? What are the reasons? And I've shared some of this as I've talked already. But there's a book called Stop Self-Sabotage. It's by Dr. Judy Ho. And in her book, she describes self-destructive behavior as a biological response. So what does that mean? So when we set goals, right? And I've talked about this last time, we're talking about our future self. I want to be healthy. I want to be fit. I want to be at a good weight. I want to be doing the things I want to do. When we set those goals and we think about that future self, we get a dopamine hit, right? We get that little boost of energy and a little bit of a high, and it's like, woohoo. But when it comes to doing those things, it's our present self. And our present self doesn't always feel like doing the things it takes to get what we said we wanted. It's so much easier to talk about what's going to happen when, the outcome, the future self. The present self wants to make life easy for itself. We seek things that make us feel good. And it doesn't maybe feel good in the moment to get up off the couch and go do the movement. It doesn't feel good in the moment to take the time to pre-pack the snacks or pre-plan the meals and pre-prepare the meals. That's not fun. That doesn't feel good. So that's one way. Sometimes when it comes, that's one reason that we can self-sabotage. So sometimes it can be we set these goals and we have high hopes and we get that dopamine burst. But when push comes to shove, we've got this fear of failure, like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that because maybe I'm not going to do it well enough and I'm not going to follow through, and then I'm going to feel like a failure, and then people are going to remind me that I'm a failure and I've done this before, and I'm going to fall into that negative spiral and that depression. So maybe it's that fear of failing again that keeps us from taking the first steps. In that case, you need to get some help. Are you willing to ask for help or to get some help? So, to avoid that threat of feeling like a failure, we shy away from our goals. Or maybe you fear success. Oh my God, what's going to happen If and when I get to this place where I'm a healthy weight and I'm doing healthy things, or I don't know what's going to happen then, or I'm not sure if I'll lose my friends. And that is scary. There's an unknown out there. So the fear of succeeding also scares me. So then when it's time to do the actual doing of what we said we were going to do, we kind of take a step back. There's a lot of reasons, and they're not on the tip of our tongue. They're not at the forefront of our consciousness. And sometimes it's almost impossible, unless we get help from other people, to dig deep and find out what the origins of these things are. And even if we can't find the origins, to say, I can do it anyway. I can take the step anyway, even if I'm not sure what exactly is in my way here. I don't need to know why I go to the drive-through to stop going to the drive-through. I may need some support. I may need some additional accountability in order to stop that. But I got to ask for that. Hard things are hard. Last week, we talked about this thing called cognitive dissonance. I want two different things. One that aligns with my values of living a healthy lifestyle, the other that goes along with I want to feel good in the moment. So I want to lose weight. That's my value. I want to live a healthy life. That's my value. But I don't like how I feel when I deny myself. I want to lose the weight, but I want to be able to eat what I want when I want. So self-sabotage, unhealthy behaviors are going to happen when there's a mismatch between our values and our behavior. Again, I've described it like this for so long. This is where we want to be. We want to be up here, living according to our values, living according to, behaving according to what we say we want. But here's where we are down here. So there's a gap. What do I have to do to close that gap so I will be engaging in the behaviors that get me to where I say I want to be? It's learning new skills. It may be hiring a coach. It may be going to therapy. It may be asking for help. Hard things are hard. But if you're going to close that gap, you can't just continue to do what you're always doing. Because if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. You know that. You also know that outside of your comfort zone is where the magic lies. So you've got to be willing to take the risk to do the things that seem uncomfortable to you, asking for help, getting counseling, getting therapy, getting a coach, making an appointment with the nutritionist. If you're not willing to do that, chances are good those behaviors aren't going to change until something helps you see and work through the obstacles that are often very, very subconscious. All right. And here's another reason. Here's another thing that we do. Reasons we engage in self-sabotage. I'm going to avoid anything that runs the risk of pain. So if I don't eat the sugar, then I feel unpleasant emotions. I feel crabby. I feel scared. I feel unpleasant. I'm not going to risk that. So I'm just going to do what I do. I don't want to risk asking for help and looking like a fool, or that's what I think. I don't want to run the risk of sharing my thoughts and feelings with my partner because maybe they'll criticize me or demean me or dismiss me. I don't want to take the risk of setting a boundary with my mother because she's likely to slash me with her vicious tongue. I'm not taking that risk. So again, outside the comfort zone, I self-sabotage to avoid the risk of pain. All right. Let's talk about this emotional pain that's related to low self-esteem. Maybe as a child, you grew up with people around you who told you directly or indirectly, you're not going to amount to anything. I think I shared with you in a recent episode, it might have been the last one, about the support group leader who had surgery 18 years ago, who said that her father, who literally told her she would never amount to anything, said to her on the day of her surgery, "What are you gonna do when you gain all that weight back?" I mean, so much negativity being poured into you by somebody who's had a huge influence on you all of your life, and somebody who all of us want to have their approval. We can say we don't care what our parents think, but somewhere deep down, all of us do. And it's an innate human desire. So, wham, if you were told those things all of your life, or if you're still told them to this day, or worse yet, and my friends, this is where the worst is. If you're doing it to yourself, if you're talking negatively to yourself about yourself, you're reinforcing something you may have been told then, but you're doing it to yourself now. This has to stop. And whatever help you need to get that to stop, please be courageous enough to do that. Because people with a low self-image, and how do you not have a low self-image? How do you not have low self-esteem? If you're told you'll amount to nothing, if you're told nobody will love you, if you're told, why do you even bother? How do you not have a low self-esteem? It's almost impossible. And if you continue to berate yourself, it's almost impossible not to have a low self-esteem. We've talked about fear of success. We've talked about fear of failure. There are prior podcast episodes on both of those topics. Go back and listen to those. Because if you have those things and you don't work through those things, then you're going to continue to engage in self-sabotaging behaviors. Friends, this stuff is not going to go away by itself. So maybe you lack the skills you need. That's very reasonable. I have a lot of compassion for people because most of us aren't taught, myself included. We're not taught healthy communication skills. We're not taught healthy ways to advocate for ourselves, to ask for what we need, to set boundaries with people, to set boundaries with ourselves. So many of us were not taught the skills, but here's where the rubber meets the road and why I say hard things are hard. This isn't going to just come to you. You got to do the hard work it takes to learn these skills. You've got to enroll in a class or in therapy or in an online class or a seminar or something that's going to teach you what these things are about. They don't teach you these things as you prepare for weight loss surgery, and they don't teach them often in bariatric support groups. You may be really fortunate and have a wonderful support group that does cover a lot of these topics, but these are critical. This isn't the first time you're hearing this, but maybe it'll be the first time you're hearing this that says, well, I guess if it's going to be, it's up to me. That means get your butt in gear and get the resources you need to learn these skills, to make the changes, to find out what's going on deep within you. All right. Finally, how do you stop engaging in this? Well, I've said a million times and it remains true. Awareness is the first step in change. So when I asked people, in what ways are you sabotaging your weight loss or your maintenance? There was no hesitation. People know, boom, 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 boom. These are the things that I'm doing. So when you're aware of what you're doing, if you're not aware, then ask people for some help. In what ways do you see me engaging in self-sabotaging behavior? Whether it's in your relationship or at work or at school or in your relationships with your children, as a coworker, a team member, and in your weight. Ask people, what do you see me doing? What about my thinking? What do you hear me say that sets me up for self-sabotaging behavior? So become aware of what self-sabotage looks like for you, because it can be different for other people. All right, then start asking yourself this question or pose this sentence to yourself. So I want to achieve and maintain a healthy weight. I want to increase my physical health. I want to improve my longevity through weight loss and weight maintenance. But I keep doing blank. Fill in the behavior. You have now identified your self-sabotaging behaviors. So once you've identified what you want and what you're doing that blocks you from getting there, then you can start to dig a little deeper and go, what's up with this? What would be some reasons somebody would do that? And ask people, ask your friends, look at other people and say, they're sabotaging themselves. I wonder what that's about. Maybe it could be about this. Maybe it could be about that. Get online, Google, why do people self sabotage? How to overcome self sabotaging behavior. Do some research, take a class. It may be the case that there's some anxiety or some depression underlying your self-sabotaging behavior. Anxiety can prevent us from following through with what we want. If I feel like I'm going to fail, if I feel like I'm going to meet the unknown, if I feel like I'm going to be met with rejection, if I feel like I'm going to be met with criticism, I'm going to have anxiety about that. So maybe we're not avoiding the goal per se. We're not avoiding the weight loss. We're not avoiding the weight maintenance. We're avoiding the thing we don't want to encounter when we set the boundary, when we share our thoughts, when we express our wants or our needs. And that's kind of a big deal. So we need help. What do I do if I get criticized? What do I do if I'm met with rejection? How do I handle being dismissed? How do I handle people not respecting what I ask of them? So we have to learn that. And that is really critical. And I think it's a huge part of what this self-sabotaging behavior is. I think people want to lose the weight, and I'm pretty sure you want to keep that weight off. What I think people don't want to experience is more rejection, is more criticism, is more being made fun of, isolating, dismissal, abuse. I think we want to avoid those things. And I think we don't set the goals, we don't set in motion the boundaries we need to, or stand up for ourselves because of the fear of those things. And there I have tremendous compassion. And yet I will follow through with the fair part, which is it's still not going to change if you don't change it. And you're still going to regain, or you're still going to veer off track if you don't do the hard work and learn to do those things and learn to suffer the consequences of standing up for yourself, or suffer the emotional consequences, not suffering them, but learning to work through the emotional consequences that you might get in response from other people. So it's true that a lot of times this uncertainty or this sadness or this fear or this anxiety of being met with those things interfere with us not doing what we're supposed to do. So we're not just avoiding reaching our goal, but we're also experiencing a whole lot of negative emotions along the way. So we got to dig a little bit deeper so that we can pinpoint what are the negative feelings I'm trying to avoid, and where can I learn to deal with what might be perceived as rejection or dismissal or criticism. One of the ways that you can try this and practice is to write things out. So maybe keep a journal. This is how I sabotage myself today. And if I think about what was going on with me, was there something I could have done? Oh, I could have said what I needed. But if I did that, then I risked being criticized. So really start to write it out. And does this take effort? Darn well it does. It takes a lot of effort to go through the work and put in the time to figure out what's going on with me. But if we don't, it's not going to change. And then we're going to keep saying, I don't know why I do what I do. Because you're not taking the time or putting forth the effort or doing the hard work it takes to find out. All right. And a lot of times, and I hate to tell you this, and not that this applies for everybody, but it applies to enough people that this is in a lot of the things you will read if you go online and do a Google search about why people engage in self-sabotage. There's a lot of childhood trauma. A lot of childhood trauma, especially if you've grown up being criticized for your weight or being sabotaged by others in relation to your weight. There's some trauma there. Or if you've been criticized, compared, experienced emotional neglect, if you've experienced any kind of overt abuse, there's childhood trauma. And stuff, that stuff repeats itself because we repeat it. We repeat it by how we treat ourselves. We repeat it by getting into relationships where we're treated similarly to how we repeat it. And we will continue, hear this, we will continue to repeat that until we learn something different, until we learn to stop, until we learn to deal with, until we learn the skills it takes to get out of that. It'll keep happening. That's why people marry the same person over and over and over. They just have a different name. I don't mean they literally marry the same person, but if you tend to marry somebody who dismisses you and you get divorced or remarried, you're probably going to marry somebody just like that. There's a reason that the divorce rate for second marriages is higher than the first, because we repeat the patterns. And a lot of them we repeat ourselves. We're abusing ourselves, neglecting ourselves, abandoning ourselves. So what you got to do is examine those root causes. This takes work. This takes risk of a terrible emotional pain. You got to look for the patterns in your life. Have you, often or in different scenarios, are you sabotaging yourself to reach goals? And do you procrastinate? Do you struggle getting started? There are reasons for that. Part of it is perfectionism. Part of it is fear of experiencing some of these things we've been talking about. The all or nothing, the perfectionist. Do you do those things? You've got to get help just to make itty bitty incremental changes. And I'm promising you these will add up. And I'm promising you this is the only way to do it, is to learn something and implement it. Learn something and implement it until you can do it with a fair amount of ease. It takes work and it takes a long time. This stuff isn't going to go away overnight, but it can improve. Practice makes progress. Practice makes progress. Practice makes progress. The question to ask yourself is, am I willing? The people who make huge, significant changes in their lives, whether it be in their relationships, in their communication, in their parenting, in overcoming an addiction, in changing unhealthy eating behaviors, are the people who put a lot of hard work and effort into it. So while I have tremendous compassion for you and for me, for those things that have led us to the place where we have treated ourselves poorly, where we have engaged in unhealthy behaviors, where we have self-sabotaged, tremendous compassion. And I have the utmost respect for the people who are courageous enough to do the hard work that leads to itty-bitty changes that lead to long-lasting changes. Those people are few and far between. Are you going to be one of them? So a few things to ask yourself, and we're getting ready to close up here. Is your behavior aligning with your goals? Am I doing the things related to food and movement that are going to help me lose this weight and keep it off? If not, what's stopping you from taking the action to make those dreams come true? Fear, anxiety, self-esteem, whatever it is. Get the help. Do you feel uncomfortable when you make progress? This was me for a long time, and I still have spells of this. I would get uncomfortable when things were going okay, waiting for the other shoe to drop. People experience this regularly because they're not used to things running smoothly or being level in their lives. If you're uncomfortable or feel uneasiness when you make progress, you got to dig deeper because you got to find out, is this based on things other people told you? You're never going to amount to anything. Or is it about a fear of failure or a fear of success or a fear of looking foolish or a fear of the unknown? Are you concerned with achieving more than you thought possible? What? What if I what if I do far better than I intended to? Oh my God, then what? And then we got all that fear of failure come back in, that fear of success. I don't deserve it. I'm not worthy of it. Good God, we have to dig deeper so that we can quit getting in our way. So you got to create a plan. Maybe that plan includes asking for help. Maybe that plan includes seeing a coach or seeing a therapist or a therapist and a coach or a personal trainer or the dietitian on a regular basis. But you got to take action. None of this is going to change unless you take some action. You've got to learn things you don't know. You've got to have an open mind. You can't think your way is the right way and it's the only way. You have to be willing to take in some new information and be willing to try some new things. And then, of course, mindfulness is what I'm doing in the moment helping me. Is this behavior going to move me forward toward my goal or away from my goal? What are my coping mechanisms? Is food what I know to do when I'm upset or angry or bored? What else could I do? What are healthy skills for that? Learning about how you feel, learning skills like breathing exercises to decrease your stress, to decrease your anxiety, learning healthy self-talk, learning to call a friend when you need a boost in confidence or somebody to say, I'm going to stay on the other line with you, I'm going to stay on the line with you until you're through that grocery store and you haven't bought anything against your plan. You can put somebody on live stream or video or whatever so they can walk through the grocery store with you. Things aren't going to change unless you learn to communicate in healthy ways. No, I can't do that for you. I have to take care of myself first. No, I'm not willing to come to this event if all of these things are going to be there. I want you to enjoy it, but I can't do that. My health is too important. No, Grandma, I'm not willing to eat just one because one turns into 1,000. So dealing with communication, I need to be able to advocate for myself. I need to ask for what I want. I need to ask for help doing what I want. So there are a lot of benefits. And setting boundaries, not only with others, friends, but with yourself. You've got to be willing to say no to yourself. But we don't want to do that because then we feel unhappy. Well, we have to live in the moment the same way we want to live in the future. Our present self can't just be all about I want what I want when I want it. All right, some take-home messages for you. This stuff's not going to change overnight. This is a lifelong pattern of progress. Little achievements becoming a progress. Consistent, healthy behavior leads to healthy habits. Hard things are hard. These things are freaking hard to change. Are you willing to do the hard work? And that's what it boils down to. So if you would leave me some comments, leave me some curiosities, leave me some thoughts, and let me know what other kinds of topics you would like me to talk about on the podcast. As always, I come to you from a place of compassion, respect, dignity, and love for you as a human being who has every amount of worth as every other person on the planet. Choose to believe it. Choose to do the work it takes to stop the self-sabotaging behavior. Cannot wait to talk with you next week and to hear from you. So leave me some comments, listen to the podcast, and invite others to do the same. Thank you sincerely for choosing to spend your time with me. Make it a great one. Bye-bye.